Hi, this is Michael with brainyfaceproject. If you're new to the channel, then welcome. If you've been here before, then welcome back. It is nice to see you again. So in Affinity Photo, if you need to make a selection, there are so many different ways to do it. And of course, you're going to make selections because you want to composite, you want to change colors, you want to do layouts, you want to edit your photos. And so in order to do that, you need to be able to basically select those pixels. In this episode of the Adobe exit plan, migrating from Photoshop to Affinity Photo, I'm going to show you a couple of different techniques, and then we're going to continue selection techniques into another video. I'm trying to break this up to make it easy to digest. How do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time. So in Affinity Photo, I'm going to double click here, and I'm going to pick from one of these various memes that I've created. I've done a lot of these in ChatGPT, and I think I'm going to go with one of my favorite movies here. I'm going to go with this one right here. And our object, or our objective here, that's a Freudian slip because we're actually going to deal with the object selection tool here. So our objective is to select this little toy, and we'll probably select the T-Rex as well. And we're going to do this by using a couple of tools which are really powerful. If you've been using Adobe Photoshop, you know that they have made it very easy to select a subject. So you need to make sure that you're running the most recent version of Affinity Photo. If you go to Help on the menu bar and you go down to About, you want to see version 2.6 or above. If you're running an earlier version of Affinity Photo, you bought the program, it's running on your computer, you need to make sure that you update the software to the latest version by doing that on Affinity site, and make sure that you're up to the latest version. Affinity released a feature, this was earlier this year, I think it was like February or March of 2025, which allowed you to use machine language learning on your computer to select objects. And the way that you get to this, just to see if you've got this installed, is to go to Edit on the menu bar, go down to Settings, and then you want to go to the second item on the left-hand side, which is Machine Learning. And this allows you to download optional machine learning models to add extra capabilities to Affinity Photo. There are two different tools that you want to download. I recommend that you download them both. Hopefully hard drive space isn't an issue. They're not that large. The saliency model is 72 megabyte. That's the one down here. And this one, saliency, basically we're talking about identifying the most prominent subject in a photo. This one doesn't allow you to have as much control as the segmentation tool, and the segmentation tool is associated with the object selection tool. So I'm going to show you how to do both of those. But first thing you need to do is, if you don't have those downloaded, make sure that you install each of those. Once they're installed on your computer, then you'll have access to the features that I'm about to show you. So that's how you go in and apply those. So now that I'm back in my photo here, let's use the subject selection tool. And we do this by going to Select on the menu bar, and then about halfway down, you can go down to Select Subject. When you click on Select Subject, it's going to use machine language learning to go in and identify the most prominent object that it thinks is important in your photo. Now that sounds cool, but the limitation to this is that it doesn't always nail it. I actually prefer to use the object selection tool, but in some cases, in many cases, it does a pretty decent job. In this case, this isn't a real person, it's a toy, and I've got the little toy T-Rex in the background, so I don't know what it's going to select. I'm going to click on Select Subject. When I do that, it's going to work for just a second. The cool thing is this is working on my computer. A lot of the Adobe Photoshop features that you use now require you to have access to the cloud. So not everything runs natively on your computer, and that's another way that Adobe kind of locks you into their subscription model. The way that Affinity Photo decided to do this You don't even need to connect to the internet, to the Affinity cloud, if there was such a thing, to use this tool. It runs locally on your computer. That's why you downloaded those files. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking it did a pretty good job. I have dancing ants. That's what I call and will call in all of my future videos these selections. So when I talk about the dancing ants, I'm talking about this little marquee line that's moving around to show you which pixels, which picture elements have been selected in the image that you're in. And right now I got more than I bargained for. I got Dr. Ian Malcolm, but I also have part of the Jeep. Like, it thought the Jeep door was important, and then it did the T-Rex, but it actually did not include the entire base here. So what I can do now is I can use more granular refinement tools. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail in this video because I do plan to get into more detail with some of the more specific tools. But there are marquee selection tools for selections. You've got the magic wand tool. They call it something else in this tool, but you can see over here on the left-hand side, it looks like a magic wand. If you're making the trip over from Adobe Photoshop, you know the magic wand tool, it's your friend. W is the shortcut, but Affinity Photo named it something else. They called it the flood select tool. I'm going to call it the magic wand tool. It's basically the same thing. And then you also have another tool which is buried underneath all of these marquee selections. And whenever you see a little triangle here, that basically means that there's more stuff hidden underneath it. And you have to click and hold your mouse button down, and then you can see, I'll let go of my mouse button now, but I can actually see that I've got many tools buried underneath it. And the lasso tool is the freehand selection tool. So Affinity calls it something else. Now, if I hover my pointer over this, it does give me a keyboard shortcut that I can use, but I wanted to point this out. If I press M, what that does, I'll move that off to the side a little bit. When I press M, it cycles through all of those tools and it actually loops around, but for some odd reason, they actually don't show you the lasso tool. If you recall, the lasso tool has an L as a keyboard shortcut. I can see that by selecting it and then moving my pointer over it. So if you want to get to the lasso tool, you have to press L, but it's kind of weird because when you press L multiple times, it actually cycles back and shows you the marquee, but for whatever reason, they opted not to actually show you the lasso tool. That's confusing. I really think they should have put the lasso tool as its own icon over here on the toolbar, because the lasso tool is used a lot in selections, and you're going to see that in the next video. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this lasso tool now, and I'm going to use this to deselect some of these other pixels so that I've got Dr. Ian Malcolm here as a standalone object. Now that I have the lasso tool selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to this context sensitive bar, and there are different icons that you can select. And what this allows you to do is you can add to a selection. If you basically move your pointer over this one and click, that's going to add new pixels. I'll demonstrate this really quickly up in this lightning area. You see how I've got that little crosshair with a plus now? That means I'm going to add, because I just chose the tool. I'm just going to draw a really quick down and dirty kind of circle right there. And now I've got dancing ants there. So I've added to the selection. But if I want to, I can actually subtract from a selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my pointer over to subtract. And when I choose subtract, what this allows me to do is I can draw around my dancing ants to remove a very large section. So on the right hand side, I'm going to demonstrate this. I'm going to draw a big circle right now around the dancing ants, which are not Dr. Ian Malcolm. And because I have the lasso tool selected and I've got the subtract icon selected, watch what happens. I draw just basically a big old section right here, and I close the loop, and what it's done now is it's actually removed those pixels from the selection. I'll do the same thing with the Jeep door right now by clicking and holding my mouse button down, and then when I close that off, now I've removed that from the selection. So that's a quick way for you to go in and remove from a selection. Another way that you can do that is if you have, like for example, if I go back and I just choose new, now what I can do is I can use keyboard shortcuts, and if I want to, I can add. Notice when I press the shift key on the keyboard, that changes the tool temporarily to the lasso tool where it adds to the selection. and I'm letting go of the Shift key now. If I press the Alt key on the keyboard, then it temporarily changes it to the subtract selection. So like if I wanted to, I could cut off his head right now. So let's cut off Dr. Ian Malcolm's head. I have the Alt key down on my keyboard, and I'm just going to click outside. It doesn't really matter where I select, but outside this area, I can click and hold my mouse button in. I'm holding down the Alt key to temporarily override to subtract, and then I'm just going to kind of like virtually cut that off. I'm going to close that loop around real quick, and now when I let go of my mouse button, I've removed his head from the selection. And during this selection process, I can always do an undo if I hold Control on the keyboard and press Z. That is the best keyboard shortcut that's ever been invented in the history of people, is Control Z, the universal keyboard shortcut for oops, I made a mistake. So now that I've got Dr. Ian Malcolm selected, you can see this took a few steps here. Now I was explaining, so if I was actually just doing it, I'd do this really, really fast. And let me just demonstrate. I'll do it quickly. If I do a Control D on the keyboard, Control D deselects the current selection, which is basically the same as going up to select, and then I have to go down here to the second most item, which is deselect. The Control D is a keyboard shortcut I use a lot. So what I'm going to do now is I'm quickly going to do this by choosing select, go down to select subject, and it makes the selection. Now I'm going to hold the Alt key down on my keyboard because I have my lasso tool selected, and I'm just going to draw a big section right there, get rid of the dinosaur, click and drag, and get rid of the door from the selection, and that's how quick you can do that. That's a lot better than going in and manually trying to like draw around this object, and that's why the select subject tool is so powerful. Now when I have a bunch of dancing ants here on the screen, I can go to select, I can choose save selection, and then I can save it as what they call a spare channel. So these alpha channels here, basically you have different types of channels. So you have composite channels, which if you're working in an RGB image, you have a channel for red, one for green, one for blue. You also have channels that you can designate which contain useful information about selections. And I tend to just call those alpha channels myself. They call them here in Affinity Photo spare channel. But before I click on that, let me just go over to channels on this palette here. So I moved over, layers was being displayed. I'm clicking on channels. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back here. Did I lose Dr. Ian Malcolm? I did. Let me do a Control Z there. So did a Control Z to get the dancing ants back. And now when I go over here to channels, I'm just demonstrating that I've got my pixel selection right now over here, but I want to save that. So I go to select, save selection, I say as spare channel, and now it shows me spare channel. And what I can do is I can right click and choose rename, and then I can just call this Dr. Ian. And now I've got that saved. Okay, so now what I can do is if I need to make that selection again, like I wouldn't want to have to repeat that over and over again. I just go over here to channels, and what I can do is I can right click on Dr. Ian, and then I can say load to pixel selection, and that restores those pixels. And this is actually stored inside the Affinity file here when I save the document. So that's one way to do it. All right, so now that we've seen that we have a really quick way to select a subject, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the object selection tool. And the object selection tool uses segmentation. This uses a segmentation machine language learning model that we downloaded before, and it's available by going over to the toolbar here, and they have an owl icon. Just think of it as the wise owl that knows how to quickly go in and select objects. Okay, and what you may notice here is I've got a keyboard shortcut that I've created because this tool out of the box doesn't come with a keyboard shortcut. So I'm also going to show you how to select that, or to actually set a keyboard shortcut as well. But let's do that after I show you this tool. Because what I can do now is I can just go in and I can click on the owl. And when I move my pointer over objects on the screen, right now nothing's happening. And this will happen to you because it happens to me all of the time. this is really important, is if you go to use the object selection tool and you're moving your pointer, you're saying, man, it doesn't seem to be working. The reason why is you need to have a layer active, because it's looking within the currently selected layer to determine which pixels within that layer are objects. So notice the difference now. If I go over to the layers palette and I just click on the icon for layers, now it's highlighted in blue. Watch what happens when I move over on the screen. So that's a really, I mean, it's a very subtle thing, but it can be confusing. If you don't have the right layer selected, it's not going to select objects. And if you have a multi-layer document, if you've got like 15 different layers, you need to make sure that you have the correct layer selected for this tool to work on that layer. But check that out. How cool is that? As I move my crosshair pointer over different parts of this image, it's actually trying to determine, like I could actually do his chest. I could go in here and I could select granular, like right now, because I'm pointing at his hand, it's looking at non-contiguous sections, but sections that match the flesh tone color. And so it's basically selecting his body. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to move back to his face, and I can see that it's automatically applying that selection. And so what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and click. And in this case, I've got the Dr. Ian Malcolm selected, and it was so much faster. Let me go ahead here and do the T-Rex. I'll just move my pointer over that. I click, and now I've got the T-Rex. What happened is this tool, like the other tools, pays attention to what you have in the context sensitive bar as an option. So the reason it added the T-Rex is if I go up here, I can look and I can see that this icon is selected to add. And so what I could do is I could choose subtract, and I'll just do this. Let me subtract that from the selection. See how easy that was? So just make sure that you have the correct one selected here. Either you can do new, or you can do add, or you could do subtract. So let's go ahead and do new. When I choose new, now if I go over to the Jeep, it should just select the Jeep, and when I click on it, I'll only have the Jeep and I won't have the Doctor or the T-Rex there. So that's the way that I can go ahead and I can make these selections pretty quickly. I'll do a Control D on my keyboard, and now let me show you how I can go ahead and set these keyboard shortcuts. So what I need to do to set these keyboard shortcuts is I want to go into Edit on the menu bar. I'll go down to Settings. And once I go into Settings, then I can go over here on the left-hand side to the Shortcuts menu. This Shortcuts menu basically shows me the persona that I'm in. If you watched my earlier video, you know that you have different edit modes in Affinity Photo, and those are determined by the icons in the upper left-hand corner here. But if I go to this pull-down menu here, I can see that I have my various personas available. And here's the key point, is that you have different keyboard shortcuts that can be applied in the different personas. So this will be probably subtle, but if I click on Liquify, you can see that the keyboard shortcuts changed. If I go to Develop, which is used for RAW, then it didn't change. But if I go to Tone Mapping, again, it didn't change. If I go to Export, it did change. So all of the menu items that you see at the top, you can assign keyboard shortcuts to them. And you do that basically by just clicking in one of these boxes. You press then the keyboard shortcut that you want to assign to it, and it's going to assign it. Now, when I do these videos, I actually usually clear out the keyboard shortcuts that I have. So I have one which is just basically a clean version. And what you can do then is you can load up. So if you get a kind of a snapshot, a point in time that you want to save, you can save those settings out, which also may not be a bad idea if you think about it. If your computer ever crashed, if you had a hard drive issue or something like that and needed to reinstall everything, you probably, after a certain amount of time, would have customized keyboard shortcuts. Throughout this series, I'm going to show you. You don't need to use them, but I'm going to show you the keyboard shortcuts that I like to set because it's just a little bit more intuitive. You save those out occasionally. So you can just go ahead and you can say save. I actually have Adobe Exit Plan series. You can see that I've saved it out for clean shortcuts. And so I've got those set in this folder. So I could just load that, but you basically just save your keyboard shortcuts. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to go in here. I know that this item is the toolbar on the left-hand side, so I need to make sure that I've got my photo persona selected. I'm going to click on the pull down, And when I click on this, it's going to show me all of the menu bar items. So each one of these items corresponds, like file corresponds to file, edit corresponds to edit, and underneath each of those menu bars I have a lot of different options. Well, I don't want to go in to any of those. What I actually want to do is choose tools, and if I go to tools, those are the tools that are on the left hand side on the margin. And if I just wheel down here, or I could scroll down, I'm looking for the object selection tool, and there it is, the object selection tool. See, it showed me the keyboard shortcut of N. I found a little bug in Affinity Photo, which is if you change your keyboard shortcuts, but you don't close the application and reopen it, it still keeps those little indicators, the tooltip indicators in there. Because before it showed that I had N as a keyboard shortcut. I did, but I loaded up my clear settings. So just, you know, if you change keyboard shortcuts and you delete one and it still shows up over there, it will disappear when you close the application and reopen it again. I think that they're just not statefully actually paying attention to what's in memory. So hopefully they'll fix that at some point. But anyway, object selection tool, I'm just going to press N. And the reason I'm choosing N is, like, you might think, well, Michael, why don't you just use O? O would make a lot more sense. If I hit O on the keyboard, notice that I have this little icon here, which is a green arrow and then a white arrow. What that means is it will accept the keyboard shortcut that I'm trying to assign, but that keyboard shortcut is already associated with a few other tools. And in this case, if I pressed O and I closed, what it would do is it would select the owl, but then if I pressed O again, it's going to start to cycle through the dodge brush tool, burn brush tool, and these tools don't really correspond to each other, and so I don't want to do that. And so what I did is I use N, and I use N just because I think I want to narrow my selection down to the object that I'm pointing to. N was an available keyboard shortcut, and that's what I'm going to go with there. So I'm going to click close. All right, so that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you, but I'll just do one other quick thing here. I'm going to open up another image. I'll go to File. I'll close this one. I don't need to save the settings. I'm just going to open up another one of these files here. I'll go down here. We've actually got fall-like weather here in Georgia today, so I'm thinking about Thanksgiving and stuff already. Autumn is my favorite season. So I'm going to go ahead and double-click on this one. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a family tradition. We watch this movie every year around Thanksgiving. So what I want to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and see what it does for the select subject. And when I choose that, I don't know what it's going to do. It's going to pick too much stuff. It did the lamp, it did Neil, it did Del Griffith, and it did kind of the bed sheet as well. That's the thing, is the subject selection tool is okay, but it's not great, and I don't want to have to go in and clean this up. What I want to do is I just want to select Neil on the right hand side there. So I'm going to do Control D to turn off the dancing ants. I'm going to press N on my keyboard now because that's the keyboard shortcut that I assigned. If I didn't assign the keyboard shortcut, I would move over and point and click on the owl. And now, because the layer is selected, it's blue over here on the right hand side. Remember again that if it wasn't, like I'm clicking down below that layer, if I move my pointer on the screen, nothing gets selected because I need to have an active layer selected. And when it is and it's blue, now I can move my pointer and it selects. Isn't that way better? I can even select a single eyebrow if I want to as well. So yeah, this is way more powerful. You can do individual eyes. I could do the lamp. And if I just click on this, now I've got my selection here, which is the object selection tool, which is great. So I'm going to do one more thing, which is I'm just going to try to change the color of his tie. One of the things that I've done in Photoshop for years and years and years is sometimes I just want to colorize a certain selection that I have on my screen. And they do things a little differently in Affinity Photo. If I go into the object selection tool and click on his tie, I'll just zoom in here by pressing Control and plus on the keyboard. And if I zoom in with Control plus on the keyboard, another thing I can do is I can temporarily change it to move. Right now I've got this selection tool I've got the owl tool selected, but if I press spacebar on my keyboard, then I can click and drag because it temporarily changes the tool to the move tool. So if I wanted to center that to a different part on the screen, then you can always press the spacebar and it temporarily overrides to the move tool, and you click and drag and you can move it anywhere you want on the screen. But I've already got my dancing ants around the tie here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control U on the keyboard. And what that's going to do is it's going to pull up the hue and saturation. And when I click and I drag on that, I can see that it's not really colorizing it. It is allowing me to change the hue. Even if I change the value here, it's doing an okay job. But what I like to do is I like to have a keyboard shortcut to go in to actually colorize my selection. And in Photoshop, if you use Photoshop, you know you have the little option that you can colorize when you're in hue and saturation. I don't see that in here, so let me just show you this. I'm going to do a close the box. I'm going to Control Z to undo what I had just done. I might need to do it a couple times, but okay, I just got rid of that adjustment layer. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to Layer on the menu bar. I'm going to go down here to New, and I'm looking for, it is buried in here. So new adjustment layer, and then I'm going to go over and down. And notice like I've got my hue saturation, which is the Control U, but there's another item right underneath it, which is recolor. And that's what I'm going to choose, is recolor. Now when I go into recolor, it looks a lot like the hue and saturation box, but this one allows me to recolor on a more granular basis. And like I could go with a couple Christmas colors. It's a Thanksgiving movie, kind of close to Christmas. But if I click and drag, notice that it just allows me to recolor. And I'm thinking I'm going to give him a green tie. And so that's a quick way for you to go in and recolor. And if I close the box, I hit Control D on the keyboard. I can then zoom out. I can always do Control and the minus key to zoom out, but if I hold Control and press 0 on the keyboard, that's going to fit within the window. That's a standard keyboard shortcut, same as it was in Photoshop. But notice now I've given him a green tie pretty easily. And I think that this is a feature that I want to use on a regular basis, is recolor. And what I don't want to do is have to go into Layer, look at like all of these different options, and then be like, oh geez, where is it? It was new adjustment layer, and then all the way down, so many options. What I prefer to do, and this is a keyboard shortcut I use in Affinity Photo, is Alt-R to recolor. So let's go ahead and set this. I'm going to go to Edit on the menu bar, go down to Settings. I go back to my shortcuts, and because I was on the Layers menu in the Photo persona, Photo's selected, so I'm good there, but I'm going to choose that pull down, and I'm going to go to Layer because that's the menu bar that the option is under. And then I'm just going to scroll down slowly until I get to the new adjustment layer section, and there it is. There it is. New adjustment layer recolor. I can click on the box and I can press Alt on the keyboard and R, and then I can close. And from this point forward now, I can always change a color by quickly doing an Alt-R. And let's do this. I'm going to press N on the keyboard. Make sure that my owl is selected. That's my object selection tool. Notice that on the right hand side, again, I know I'm like overemphasizing this, but otherwise you could lose your mind thinking, why isn't the tool working? You need to make sure the right layer is selected. So I'm clicking because right now the object selection tool is not doing anything. If I click on the background layer, now it's actually doing its job. And let's just for grins, let's give him like pink shoes. This is horrible and terrible, and we wouldn't actually do this, but I'm just making a point how easy it is now to do it, because I did the object selection tool by N. I click and I choose the shoes. I press Alt-R on the keyboard to go to recolor because we just assigned that keyboard shortcut. And now I can go in here and I can choose like kind of pink shoes. And so I can just click and drag and give him those shoes. And I think I want to go with, we'll do like clown shoes. We'll do green. We'll match his shoes to his tie. He's horribly color coordinated here. So there we go. And so we're going to close that out. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to show you today. Just a quick review. Today, we learned how to go into Affinity Photo and make sure that we're using or have available the saliency model and the segmentation model, which are very quick machine language learning models that you can download for free once you've bought Affinity Photo. You can download them and you can use them. The subject selection tool is less granular than the other tool. You don't know what you get, and you always have to go in and clean up by using different selection tools like the lasso tool, they call it, what do they call it here? The lasso tool. They call it the freehand selection tool. We know it's the lasso tool. And then the other way that you can do it is by using the owl, which doesn't have a keyboard shortcut. So we assign the keyboard shortcut of N to narrow the selection then. And when you have the correct layer identified, when you click on it, it allows you to very quickly go in, and you can just move your pointer around and you can click to select that. And then we also learned how you can save that active selection as an extra channel, or they call it a spare channel in Affinity Photo. So that wraps up today's video. If you like this video, please comment, like, subscribe, share, do all the good YouTube stuff. And I will have more videos coming out as part of the Affinity Photo Expert Series here, or the migration from Adobe Photoshop over to it. Thanks for watching. See you soon.